Alright, so we have all of our grooves cut, we have all of our parts cut out. We are at this point ready to assemble both the upper and the base cabinet. So we're going to do this in sort of two phases. The first thing we're going to do is assemble just the boxes, get everything tight, get our stretchers in, or straps, whatever you want to call them. And then we'll let it dry overnight with the glue in it. We'll come back and then we'll attach our face frames. We could probably do this in one big old step, but I'm just going to break this out to make it a little easier. So I've got my bottom board. I'm just going to move this out of the way for a second. And here are my two side pieces to my bottom cabinet. Alright, so we have all of our grooves cut, everything looks good. So at this point, what I want to do is I'm going to lay one of the sideboards down. And I'm going to insert, I'll turn this so you can see it a little clearer. Alright, I'm going to insert my bottom board. Okay, it's just going to drop right in there. And as I'm assembling this, I want to make sure that this intersection here is flush. Okay, that's really important to a quality finish, having that nice and tight. All right, so I'm checking my back gap here to make sure it doesn't block that back gap. It doesn't. It looks good. All right, I'm pretty confident this is going to go well. So I'm going to put some glue in this joint. Okay, take this out. Alright, I got my wood glue. I'm going to run a bead in here. I'm not going to go nuts, but I do want a pretty liberal amount of glue. Make sure there's no sawdust in here either. Alright, so the wood glue is pretty strong stuff once it starts to set up. I've also got my brad nailer ready to go, and I'll show you what that's going to do for us in a minute. Let's get our other piece out of the way. Do this in sections. So I'm going to drop this board in, feeling for flushness. Feels good. Alright, so I got my brad nailer. And in this brad nailer I've got 3/4 inch long brad nails. I don't have the full 1 1/4 inch which I would normally use for trim. And what I'm going to do is toenail, toenail this in place from the bottom to the top. And what that'll do is sort of keep it in place for me. Alright. Next thing I'm going to do is actually go grab the backboard, slide the backboard in place, and then we'll attach the side. So to do that, let me go get the backboard. Okay, when we cut this too, we wanted to make sure our grain ran in one direction, and that is the longer direction. In this case, it's top to bottom. All right, so that looks pretty good in there. I'm gonna go on a limb here and say it may be it may be a little too long, so I may have to trim this back, and we're gonna go check that out. Put our other piece on here. And that's okay. Not a big deal. Alright, there's our other piece. I can probably see this thing. It's too long. Yeah, it's way, way too long. So I'm going to remeasure this and cut it. In the meantime, this actually can slide in from the top later on. So what we're going to do to keep moving here is flip this guy up, trying to take the stress off this joint by, there we go. Alright, good, that's not going anywhere. We'll need this again. This can be pretty awkward to do. It's alright. So obviously the toenail thing there was a good idea. Put a little more glue down here. We can go actually do our back piece last, and we can probably throw a top stretcher in here in the meantime. Alright, so let's get this guy here. Alright. Alright. Flush it up at the front. Now if this cabinet were between other cabinets to the point where actually you weren't going to even see it, if the sides weren't exposed, you could actually just put screws in right from the sides, because frankly, who cares? No one's going to see them, right? Alright. Alright, actually, this is a great spot to take a pause, grab one of my clamps, okay. Hopefully this is long enough. It's not. I gotta use a pipe clamp. Okay, so we have a nice pipe clamp here. We'll put this right in there. And this will help keep this joint together. Alright. Temporarily, I'll put one across the front. Okay. This will help keep this glue joint tight while we mess around with the other stuff. I would like to show you that I'm really smooth and this is really super easy, but it's awkward and it's a pain in the butt. Alright. There we go. Alright. Okay. While that is set there, I'm going to lower that. I've got a couple stretchers. Alright, one of them is actually going to go across the top here. So I got my pocket screws and my pocket screw drive. And we're going to put the first of the stretchers actually in the front. So I've got my right angle clamp. So even though this is a Groove and Dado Construction cabinet, we're adding some additional reinforcements with pocket screws. I don't want this to be right in the front. I want this to be recessed back a few inches. Whoop. Alright. Go ahead and put this in. Having a second person to help you during this part of the project is not a bad idea. Okay. Yeah, make sure it's square here, both at the top but also front to back. And you can do that just by checking the gap. All right. It's a little too tight. Wow, this thing is tight. These things are good. All right. Good. Good. Okay. All right, so our cabinet is pretty much put together. We need to slide our back panel in, and then we could, what's left will be, I'll have a stretcher back here, I'll have a stretcher back here, and the stretchers will give us structural support. So when we install this to a wall, it's going to have something to give the fasteners some meat to grab into the cabinet and some strength. And so that back piece will slide in first, and the stretchers, straps, or whatever they are, go back behind them. And then we can actually nail or screw in, or just glue them, whatever, together, the back and the stretcher. We can also tack nail our backboard into this bottom board. Okay, so I went ahead and cut the back panel to the appropriate size. What we're going to do is, I'm not going to glue this in. You can if you want, but there's not a whole lot of point to it. I'm just going to slide it in the back. And it's going to want to catch here. Got a bit of a bow in it. Oh, great. So what I want to do is just make sure it's flush on both top, right there. All right, it's flush. What I can do is now take, should probably swing this around so you can see it. All right, that'd be helpful. All right, so again, checking it to make sure it's flush here. That'll indicate some level of squareness. And then I'll put a nail, put a couple nails here. Okay, and then I will check the top over here and do the same. And then I can just kind of put a couple more in. All right, now that this looks good here, what we're ready to do is add the rest of our strap. So I'm going to go ahead and put these in. There's going to be a strap across the top here, as I mentioned before. And then I'll put one down here, just above where the bottom board sits. All right, and that'll help pull this together, but it'll also help with the strength and all that stuff. So I'm going to take a pause here and get these two pieces in, and then we'll take the clamps off, check it for square, and see how it looks. Okay, so I finished putting the two other back straps on the back, and so this is all set up. What we're going to do in a second is check for squareness, but first I wanted to show you what this is just going to look like with our face frame attached. Alright, so we'll do this in the next section, but our face frame will pretty much sit flush to the top with a little bit of overlap on the sides, and there you go. So it's starting to look like an actual kitchen cabinet, which is pretty cool. Alright, so let's get this out of the way. To check for squareness, again, I'm just going to take some tape measure. First I'm going to actually lay this down, it's a little easier. Flip this over, lay it down. So even though the glue hasn't dried, you know, with the cleats, the straps we used, everything is pretty well held together, which is nice. Alright, so I'm going to measure from one corner to the next, and this one is 42 and looks like 11/16. And over here, 42 11/16. So awesome. So it is perfectly square, which is awesome, because that never happens for me.